Hello, fourth graders. This is Mrs. Dearden. I'm excited to read with you Charlie's Raven. We are starting on chapter 12. Some of you had read a few pages inside there, but I want to make sure we're all in the same spot. So I'm going to read all of chapter 12 today. But first, I'm supposed to give a shout out to my son who set up my audio and video. He said, don't take any credit for my cool text. So thank you, Carter. And second, I wanted to acknowledge that this is being read by permission of Scholastic, and we appreciate that they're helping out so that we can stay connected during this interesting time of life. All right, in the email that I'm sending with this, it'll also give a summary of what's happened so far. So if you have siblings or your parents or anybody else who's bored who wants to listen to this, they are welcome to sit back and relax and enjoy chapter 12 of Charlie's Raven by Jean Craighead George. And students, just like we do in our nature guides, if it helps you to focus, feel free to write down some words that you hear that you don't know, or some great imagery, or draw a lovely picture of the nature that's being described. All right, let's go. The Raven Owner's Drum. Charlie's dad drove a reluctant son back to Jackson Saturday morning. But by Monday, Charlie was glad to be back with his friends and back in school. Through September, he watched the early snowstorms fall and melt, but hold fast on the mountain peaks. With each storm, the snow line moved lower until by mid-October, the Great Range was alabaster white. The valley, however, was snowless. Charlie returned to the ranch every weekend. Mysteriously, blue sky appeared when he arrived and disappeared when he left. Where did he go? Grandma Sally said she never saw him all week, and she never saw Pinecone at all. On the night of October 17, the storm arrived that would lock up the valley until spring. The snow poured out of the sky like a waterfall from dusk until dawn. It stopped just after sunup and started again an hour later. This time it rode horizontally on raging winds. That morning, the day of the teepee festival, Charlie arrived from town on the snowplow. He jumped down into the deep powder and waved goodbye to Jerry, the driver. Tramping toward the house, he pounded a path to the doorway. He sent the snow sparkling up from his boots to fall back down with the snow from the clouds. Quark, quark, quark! Blue Sky flew over his head and ignored the snow alit on the roof. Blue Sky! Charlie stopped packing the trail. Well, I shouldn't be surprised. It's the weekend, and so here you are. Blue Sky clucked, "Caw, caw, caw." It's me, I'm here. Charlie held up his hand, and his now radiantly beautiful friend dropped gently onto it. They exchanged loving raven crums all the way to Granddad's porch steps. Then Blue Sky flew to the roof. Come on in, Charlie said to him. Granddad needs you. Blue Sky did not even glance at Charlie. He hopped and flapped to the ridge, toppled onto his back, and slid down the snowy incline. He caught himself at the end, flew back, and slid down again. Grandma Sally, Granddad, Charlie shouted as he ran into the house, greeting them hastily, and beckoned. Come outside, he said. Come see what Blue Sky's doing. Grandma Sally threw on her down parka and ran out into the blizzard. Write it down, Blue Sky yelled, took off from the roof, and flew down to the big cottonwood tree. Write what down? Grandma grumped at Blue Sky. That you can fly to a tree? What's so great about that? Gosh, Charlie commented. He was sledding, getting on his back and sledding down the roof. Now look at him, just sitting. Who was it that said ravens are unpredictable? He glanced at Grandma Sally. That's the best observation ever made. Blue Sky took 2 backflips off the limb, slid into a half roll, and landed on the roof of Charlie's cabin. And that proves I'm right, she said. Blue Sky just performed like an acrobat, not a bird. Unpredictable. She shook her head and gathered a load of wood. Where are your folks, Charlie? They'll be here as soon as Dad gets them plowed out, he said, and picked up the snow shovel to clear the porch. They sent me ahead to help you. Put down the shovel. That can wait, Grandma Sally said. The sourdough pancakes, ham, eggs, cheese, and orange juice cannot. Blue Sky slid down the roof on his back again. Snow flew from his wings. He took a swan dive off the eaves and landed on Charlie's shoulder. Amazing, Grandma Sally said, then pleadingly, Blue Sky, please come to breakfast. Granddad's not been feeling well. You haven't been back to see him, and he's so much better when you visit. She picked up a broom, a permanent winter fixture by the door, and brushed snow off her boots before going into the house. Granddad was dozing in his chair by the window. Blue Sky flew from Charlie's shoulder to his knee. Granddad awoke with a start and, smiling broadly, touched his head to Blue Sky's head. "Hello, beautiful bird. Where have you been? I don't see you all week. Are you like Charlie and only visit on weekends?" Up went Blue Sky's black, glistening head bonnet. "I miss you." Down went the throat and leg feathers. "I think you're great." Blue Sky gave several undulating quirks, meaning, "I am here. Take notice." "You look splendid," Granddad continued in a sing-song voice. "Your feathers shine like jewels and your eyes are bright and clear. You look presidential." "Write it down," said Blue Sky, and flew to his place at the table. Granddad took his chair, making sure he sat with his head lower than Blue Sky's. He knew his station in this raven's world. Blue Sky ate daintily, taking small pieces of food in his beak and swallowing them quietly. "Hey, look how nicely he's eating," Charlie observed. "That's new. What's he up to?" "Something unpredictable," said Grandma Sally. "Beware the raven." "Isn't that what Mr. Spinder said?" She chuckled and gave Blue Sky a piece of pancake dripping with butter. The pill dish came out. Blue Sky grabbed the orange pill. Granddad reached to take it from him. Then Grandma Sally squeezed juice and handed it to him. Down went the pills. Blue Sky flew to the floor and walked to the door with Charlie, who let him out. But this time, Charlie followed him. He was beginning to suspect Blue Sky of chicanery. Suddenly, a cloud of snow blew into Charlie's face. When he had wiped it away, Blue Sky was nowhere to be seen. "Morphed into sky," he said, and scratched his head. Charlie went inside and threw his bag on the cot in Grandma Sally's sewing room, where he slept in winter. His little cabin had no stove, and winter temperatures could drop to 30 and 40 below zero. Although there were 3 bigger bedrooms for his parents, Andy and his visitors, Charlie chose this room because it looked out on the mountains. When the snow stopped falling, Charlie fought back the winter. He shoveled snow off porch and steps, stacked firewood in the bin by the stove, and shook snow from the aspen and pine limbs to keep them from breaking. He did not dig a path from the house to the cars, but packed the snow with his feet. Packed snow was the best footing. While he worked, he watched for Blue Sky. Once he saw a single raven being chased by a pair of ravens. The pair called the 3 short quirks that meant, "Get out of here! Get out of here! My territory!" The single raven left. The pair danced and tumbled down the white landscape, then dove into the pines on Bison Butte. "Blue Sky's parents," he said, and wondered if the single raven was Blue Sky or even Pinecone. No one had seen Pinecone for a long time, but since he could not see bands on the single raven, he knew he could only guess. But of course, he did not dare write that down. Charlie's parents and Andy arrived in time for lunch. His brother, who had the blue eyes and strong, wiry body of his mom, was out of the blue truck and into the snow in one antelope leap. "Where's Blue Sky?" he called to Charlie. "He's around here somewhere," Charlie said. "Help me find him." He led his brother in a wide circle around Granddad's house, peering into pine trees and under eaves. "Maybe he left," Charlie said. I saw his parents chase him away." "His mom and dad chased him away?" Andy put his mittened hands on his hips. "That's mean." "It's good," said Charlie. "It's time for him to leave home and seek his fortune. All kids have to do that." On the south side of the house, where the wind had blown the ground clear of snow, a solitary gold dandelion stood. Charlie picked it. "I'm going to take this to Granddad," he told Andy. "He admires these hardy survivors." Grandma Sally whistled her shrill call from the porch. "Good," said Andy. "Lunch is ready. I'm starving." Chris had come out to fetch wood for the stove. He walked back inside with Charlie. "I've been meaning to tell you how proud I am of you," he said. "You make your Granddad one happy man this summer. He feels like a naturalist again, with Blue Sky to study and you to talk to him and learn." "I love him," said Charlie. "I just want to make him well." That evening, as the sun was setting behind the mountains, the rhythmical beat of native drums sounded across the sagebrush. "Let's go," Charlie said as he dried and put away the pan he had scrubbed clean. "We've been summoned." Andy passed his mom at the door. "I'm walking," he said. "The road's plowed." Out he went. Charlie put a log on the wood stove and banked the fire for the night. A wave of excitement ran down his spine. Every year at this time, Flying Cloud held a ceremonial evening honoring the sky, the earth, and the animal spirits. Charlie loved this night. After it was over, he always saw the world differently, and right now, he needed some insights. He had read over his notes during the week, and categories good and bad, and even mysterious, were not making sense. One was eclipsing the other. Ravens were ravens, his notes seemed to say. Grandma Sally pulled the truck up the porch, and Charlie and Chris helped Granddad into it. He had to be driven through though the teepee was not far. As Charlie closed the door on Granddad's side, he heard the feather rustle that said, "You're disturbing me." The sound came from under the porch eaves. Charlie leaped onto the porch. "Blue sky," he said, peering into the dark. "So this is where you go when no one can find you." The bird shook his feathers again. Okay, I'm bothering you." He jumped off the porch and climbed into the truck. His eyes were bright as a crystal ball. He knew where blue skies slept. Grandma Sally drove onto the plowed road and stopped. Not far away stood the teepee. It glowed yellow-orange like a Japanese paper lantern on the snow. "Beautiful," she said, then slowed up to the round teepee door. After Granddad was helped from the truck, he insisted on waiting until everyone but he and Charlie were in the teepee. Then he walked to his seat on his own. Charlie followed, ready to help if necessary, and hoping that Granddad's burst of energy was because blue sky was back. "Write it down," he said to himself. The small fire in the teepee threw a low light, so it took several minutes for Charlie's eyes to adjust. Flying Cloud was seated by the altar with a buffalo skin across his shoulders. He wore a beaded loincloth and elegant ankle bracelets of fur and silver. His headpiece was a fan of eagle feathers in a narrow line from forehead to the nape of his neck. Across from him stood Soaring Swallow in her white deerskin dress. Fringes hung from the sleeves. The silver belt she wore was so long it rounded her waist and fell to her ankles. Her boots were elaborately decorated with dyed porcupine quills. Tonight, her hair lay in one braid down her back. A cape of turquoise beads lay on her chest. She knelt beside Singing Bird, who also wore her beautiful white deerskin dress. Charlie greeted his host with a raised hand. Then he sat down cross-legged on the men's side of the teepee. Beside him was his dad, then Andy, and beyond him, "Mr. Spender?" Charlie gawked and looked across the room. Mrs. Spender sat with Grandma Sally and his mom. "Boy, write that down," he mumbled. "The Raven haters are sitting with the Raven lovers." He glanced at Singing Bird for an explanation. She looked at her father. Flying Cloud arose. He chanted in a deep, melodious voice and turned to the 4 cardinal points of the earth, north, south, east, and west. His chants told of their significance, and Charlie felt he was being bonded with the earth and everyone present, even Mr. Spender. He wondered if that was the reason Mr. and Mrs. Spender had been invited to this ceremony of oneness. Flying Cloud then stood before Granddad and, holding his hands to the heaven, sang these words in English. "In the house of long life, there I wander. In the house of happiness, there I wander. Beauty before me, with it I wander. Beauty behind me, with it I wander. Beauty below me, with it I wander. Beauty above me, with it I wander. Beauty all around me, with it I wander. In all old age traveling, with it I wander. On the beautiful trail I am, with it I wander." When the song was over, Flying Cloud stood quietly for a long moment. "That is a Navajo song," he said. "It's part of the 12th dance in the mountain chant. When all the dances are carried out properly, that song has the power to transform a sick person into a healthy one. I talked on the phone to the Navajo chief yesterday. He said that the Navajos on the reservation had completed the dance properly this month. I have completed the song." He looked up the sky through the smoke hole. He did not look at Granddad. But Charlie felt hope. Granddad would get well. He glanced at Singing Bird, waiting for her to tell the story of the sick woman who was cured by the raven. That would let the Spenders know the value of ravens. But Singing Bird sat on her heels and smiled. Soaring Swallow picked up 2 globular rattles decorated with fur and feathers and gave them to Flying Cloud. Then she took the small black drum from the box that held the raven owner's artifacts, and Singing Bird threw some cedar twigs on the fire. The teepee filled with the clean odor of the plains. Flying Cloud spoke. "The dance I'm about to perform was taught to me by a raven owner. It is a dance telling of the connection between raven and mankind." Now Charlie knew why the Spenders were asked. Flying Cloud bent his knees into a deep crouch and low to the ground danced vigorously. The rattle swooshed like raven wings. Suddenly he jumped to his feet and, holding one arm high slowly, clicked his tongue to make the knock, knock, knock of the raven call. Then he bowed and opened his arms. "I don't get it," said Mr. Spender. A sudden northeast wind blew smoke down the smoke hole. Everyone's eyes burned. Mr. Spender coughed. Singing Bird arose and stepped outside. With the flip of the long 2 poles attached to the smoke flaps, She faced them to the southwest, and the smoke poured out. The air in the teepee cleared. Singing Bird took the raven owner's drum from her mother and returned it to his box. She faced the guests. I am going to tell you a story, she said. In a valley long ago, the animals were dying of starvation. They did not know how to change their terrible destiny. One day, Raven came into the valley with a mouthful of corn. He had eaten his fill, and so he dug a hole and cached the leftovers for another day. But he didn't come back to get them, and when spring came, the corn grew tall and flourished. Hare ate its leaves. Deer ate its tassels. Antelope ate its kernels. When Raven came back to the valley years later, Coyote, Wolf, Bear, and Wolverine cried out, "Do something for us too! We meat eaters are starving!" "Follow me," Raven said, and led them to a fallen bison that had thrived on the corn. With their strong teeth, they tore open the carcasses, and not only did they eat, but Raven did too. Then they all napped, except Raven. He carried off the small bits of feast and hid them in holes and under rocks and plants. Insects found the hidden food and multiplied. Reptiles found the insects and multiplied. Birds found the insects, the corn, and even the meat, and multiplied. And all because Raven came to the valley. Singing Bird bowed to the four corners of the earth and sat down on her heels. Charlie smiled. He knew that story was meant for one person, Mr. Spender. I get it, Mr. Spender said. That's a good lesson. We should all store things for a rainy day. It sounded like an ecological lesson to me, said Granddad. The lesson is ravens are good, said Grandma Sally. Charlie didn't speak. He was pondering whether ravens were good or bad, or neither. Flying Cloud now prepared his pipe of peace to pass around the circle. Charlie wondered if he was going to let Mr. Spender smoke it. Only friends shared the sacred pipe. He waited to see. The pipe was long and white. Along its carved stem, tassels hung on strings of beads. They danced when Flying Cloud tamped the tobacco into the bowl. That done, he leaned gracefully over the fire, lit a pine stick, and blew then the pipe. He took a long draught of smoke and slowly blew it out. He passed the sacred pipe to his left. Granddad put it in his lips and took 2 long draughts. Then he passed the pipe to his left. Mr. Spender took a draught. He's a friend, Charlie thought. Perhaps Flying Cloud knew about his raven-friendly environment would affect Mr. Spender. That's what Granddad thought Charlie's study would be about. Mr. Spender passed the pipe to him by reaching over Andy's head. Don't smoke, Charlie, Granddad said. You're too young. I took 2 smokes, 1 for you. He winked at Grandma Sally as if this was something she had planned. You took a smoke for Andy, Charlie said, and pulled on the pipe, copped, and started it back through the men to the women. They passed on their left as they too smoked the sacred pipe of peace. As it moved, there was a feeling of peace in the teepee. Even Mr. Spender's face showed goodwill. Charlie thought about the ritual of passing the pipe always to the left. Routine, he said to himself. Both ravens and humans live by routine. Good, bad, mysterious, or just the plain best way to live. Flying Cloud sprinkled blue cornmeal on the altar, and the ceremony was over. Mr. Spender then turned to Granddad and shook his head. By the way, he said, my name's Alfred Spender. Call me Al. And my wife would like to be called Lizzie. May I call you Will? Makes sense, said Granddad. Al helped him up and through the long round door. Outside in the night, the snow crystals reflected back the light of the eternity of stars. The effect was so bright that Granddad could see the bumper sticker on the Kenton's truck. It read, Standing Rock Middle School Girls and Boys Baseball Team. Good team, he said. Charlie's dad was pulling out of the teepees by Andy, who was eager to get home. What's the big hurry? Granddad asked his grandson. Snowboard race tomorrow, Andy said and held up his thumbs. And believe it or not, he wants to get his sleep, said Chris. Nancy came out of the teepee, kissed Granddad and Grandma goodnight, and climbed into the red truck with Chris and Andy. They knew Charlie would be staying at Granddad's. When they had driven off, Mr. Spender turned to Granddad. You're a naturalist, I hear. My brother and I bought a commercial tree farm. Maybe someday you or your son could look at it and give us some advice. Where is it? South of here on the other side of the mountain range. My brother lives in Idaho and thought this was a good buy. What kind of trees? Red fir. Good money in red fir. Granddad looked up at the endless tangle of stars, wondering if he should worry this man. Then thought he should. There's been an outbreak of army cutworms in that area. I hope you didn't buy a pig in a poke. No, I sure didn't. My brother and I had a forester check out everything. Good, healthy trees. Also beautiful. Liza and I are going to spend the winter in the house there. It's very up to date. Warmer? Well, that, and also has a laundry, dishwasher, and a video and computer room. He looked back at the teepee. I wonder what's delaying Liza. It's cold. In the warm teepee, Liza was chatting amicably with Grandma Sally and Soaring Swallow. Charlie interrupted to tell his grandmother that he should walk home later. Flying Cloud had asked him to stay and put out the fire and lace up the teepee. That's fine, she said, and Singing Bird escorted the two women outside and returned to the fire. The four were now alone. Sit down, Charlie. Sit down, Singing Bird, Flying Cloud said, and sat himself cross-legged on the south side of the glowing embers. Singing Bird has a story to tell you, Charlie, he said, and opened the box that held the Raven owner's drum and lance. She sat down and folded her arms in her lap. Long, long ago, she began, looking up at the stars shining through the smoke hole, a young Lakota Sioux chieftain met the first Raven. If you take me into your tribe and share food with my kind, Raven said, I will warn you of enemies. His enemies, the Ojibwe tribe, lives on the Great Plains where the chieftain lives. The Ojibwes had won many battles and killed many of the chieftain's warriors. The chieftain liked Raven's offer and adopted him into their tribe. One day, when Raven was flying over the land, he saw an army of Ojibwes in war bonnets. They were sneaking through a hill pass. He flew to the chieftain and yelled the Raven cry that meant, enemy! Show me where, said the chieftain. Raven's sword, then pointing one wing toward the hills, held the other wing close to his body. The chieftain led his warriors where Raven had wing-dipped and took the enemy from behind. His victory was great. The Ojibwes never returned. Chieftain named his tribe Raven Owners. Ever after, boys who wanted to join the tribe were tested for their knowledge of ravens before they could become a Raven owner. Those who passed were given a small black drum. Singing Bird stood up. Stand up, Charlie, Flying Cloud said. By the faint orange light of the embers, Charlie saw Flying Cloud take the rare and precious black drum out of its box and walk up to him. You are now a Raven owner, he said, and gave him the drum. Charlie blinked back tears until he could speak. Then he looked up at Flying Cloud. I have a very short story to tell you. What is it? This is the honor of my life. All right, that's the end of chapter 12. We will continue on next time on chapter 13. Thank you for watching.